Everyone is obsessing over AI models and algorithms, but what if they're all missing the real competitive edge? Charles, investor at Kinnevik with 1.5 billion euros to deploy, reveals why the Nordic region is unexpectedly becoming Europe's AI talent hub.
Technology is never the constrained resource. Differentiation, really, is in this assembly of people and how we manage them.
While the world obsesses over models and algorithms, Charles reveals what actually drives AI success.
The question you ask is fundamentally one about pools of talent, and in particular, why the Nordics has the right pools of talent to build a great application company.
But here's what most investors miss. The Nordic region's hidden engineering power is astonishing.
We looked at how many people from the Nordics and Baltics were working in the large LLM companies. It was something like over 50, including, interestingly, some very young people there as well.
And it's not just about technical talent. The real competitive edge? Operational firepower from world-class teams.
And these guys are coming out of the likes of Klarna, Spotify. They know how to go to 0 to 1 and 1 to 10 and then 10 to 100. Distribution is almost as important, maybe as important as what you're doing on the technology and product side.
Charles breaks down the 3-part formula that's driving Nordic AI success.
To build a really great application company, you need a 10x product. So you need a novel wedge and something that's very differentiated to other products. You then need really great engineering. And then lastly, you need really talented people to help distribute the product.
And what this means for the future will transform how we think about building companies.
We could have a very big company built with 10, 20 employees. That is not obvious if AI continue to improve.
Join us for a fascinating conversation about the future of AI, talent, and why the Nordic formula might just determine the next wave of tech winners. This one's for you if you're thinking about AI, talent moats, or where Europe's next unicorns will emerge. Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. Discover where operational expertise meets innovation. With end-to-end coverage across fund admin, tax, accounting, compliance, ESG, and more, we take care of the complexities so you can focus on what matters most. Whether it's supporting visionaries or maximizing returns for your LPs, our tech-driven and comprehensive solutions empower you to achieve your goals with confidence. Partner with Ace Alternatives to streamline your operations and elevate your fund's success.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Charlie, welcome to the European VC podcast.
Thanks very much for having me. As we were just saying now, it's my first ever podcast, so very excited.
And to everyone tuning in today, we're talking to Charlie from Kinnevik. And for that reason, the first thing I will ask you, Charlie, and I'm saying Charlie, I'm very colloquial. I hope that's okay. Otherwise, Charles Martin, if we said the whole name. We're going to talk everything about first a bit on Kinnevik, just so everyone knows the story and who you are, where you're focused. And then after that, we're going to dive into AI in the Nordics and why you as a Brit are spending a lot of time in Copenhagen these days.
Of course, sounds good. But we can start with Kinnevik. So Kinnevik are a very differentiated investment firm. It's actually the primary reason I moved to Stockholm was because I really wanted to work for them. And I think there are a few really key things to understand. The first one is that we're the only truly multi-stage European fund. So we can invest from anything from first check all the way up into the public markets. So truly full stack in that sense. The second part of this is scale. So with around 1.5 billion euros in cash to deploy, we have more firepower than pretty much any of the other funds operating in this part of the world. So Axel Europe, Atomico, Bolton, etc. And then I think the third part, which really sets us apart from the others, is we have a very long-term perspective. So our average holding period for companies is around 12 years. And this is a function of fund structure. And that's because we don't have LPs. It's an evergreen setup. So we reinvest our own capital back into businesses, meaning that we don't need to seek a liquidity event for ourselves in a sort of 5 to 7 year time period. So when you pair scale with a multi-stage capability and a long-term perspective, you get a real anchor and long-term partner on the cap table. And you can take something like TravelPerk as an example of this. So TravelPerk recently announced their, I think, near 3 billion valuation the other day. And that's a company that we invested in, I think, 14 times since we invested early on. which is, I think, a great case study on why the value proposition is different. Lastly, this is a recipe that's worked very well. So we've had several billion and multi-billion dollar companies, including Clio, TravelPert, Muse, Spring Health, Zalando, Livongo, and then more recently in AI companies like Recursion and Veda, with a few exciting ones in stealth also. So it seems to be a recipe that is working pretty well.
Beautiful. Let me just ask you, where does the money come from?
So Kinnevik has a pretty colorful history. So around 100 years ago, we were actually in pulp and forestry. And then in the 70s, we transitioned into building big telco companies and challenging entrenched monopolies. So we built companies like Tele2, for example, there. And then at the turn of the century, so start of the millennia, we went, okay, let's do pure play tech investing. And that is all we do now. And that is, what the entire sort of balance of our portfolio is venture and growth, typically private companies, unless they've graduated or we've made a public investment.
And yourself, Charlie, where do you spend the majority of your time in, if we start with stages, but also location-wise?
Yeah, of course. So I work on our ventures team at Kinnevik. So anything from, I would say, first check to Series B. As I said earlier, I actually moved out to the Nordics because I wanted to work for Kinnevik. So I also have a very strong focus on anything that's Nordic or Baltic related. And then in terms of where I cast that focus, I'd say software and in particular AI application companies. So that's my sweet spot.
And now let's move into the bulk of today's conversation, not to make a reference back to bulk trading as in the good old days for Kinnevik. I'm saying Kinnevik, and that's a bit because I'm coming here from the Nordics, and that's at least how my peers primarily have pronounced it. So if anyone listening in are feeling that, wait, what company are you guys talking about? It's because we're from different backgrounds, so we have different pronunciations here. I want to ask you then about this whole context, for AI in the Nordics. Why exactly is it that you think that the new Nordics is a place where AI will be especially well positioned to be a big outlier?
It's such a great question. And just quickly on the name thing, it's something that I get wrong. It's something my London colleagues get wrong. There is definitely a right way to say it, and I'm not going to change it.
Yeah. But we'll add that to our Swedish colleagues.
But the question you ask is fundamentally one about pools of talent, and in particular why the Nordics has the right pools of talent to build great application companies. So I think there are 3 layers to this, and I'll map out each of those for you. The first is around technical talent. And firstly, you have very high quality in the Nordics. And when we spent some time looking at this area and building this thesis around Nordic AI, we looked at how many people from the Nordics and Baltics were working in the large LLM companies. And it was something like over 50, including, interestingly, some very young people there as well. And then there's the skills and the capabilities in the region around technicals. And in particular, you have a high concentration of AI-specific capabilities, so PhDs, researchers, etc. And then more generally, software engineering, which is very important in particular, as we now have had this sort of first wave of innovation at the LLM layer, and it's now about connecting that and embedding that into applications. And this is a term referred to as the AI engineer.
Do you consider the foundational layer done? Like, we're not going to see any new entrants in this space, especially not from Europe?
When you look at the constraints, so the things that that make it hard just to spin up a foundational model, right? Instantly, it's in particular that more research heavy talent and then capital. And Europe has both of those things in abundance, and the Nordics does as well. I don't think it's the end of it. And I'm sure that we'll see other companies coming into the space.
Yeah, so you do keep an eye out for new players in the foundational layer as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Interesting. It's a funny discussion that I'm sure a lot will weigh in on as they listen to this. Okay, so now you went into the AI engineer. Let me know, how do you think about AI engineers? How are they different from the usual engineers, so to say?
It's pretty much typical software engineering, but with an understanding of how LLMs work and then how you can embed that into workflows. These people are really important. And actually, when we speak to our portfolio companies, they've had a lot more leverage in AI by going and hiring these sort of hungry engineers that understand AI, than going and hiring a bunch of research scientists and PhDs.
And then let's dive into, because I want to ask you the big question: why the new Nordics? Because, and if we really pull it apart, you say we have technical talent, we have operational talent, we have the inventive mindset. If we start with the technical talent, can you unpick that for me?
Yeah, of course. So as I was like alluding to on the AI specific bucket of talent, and then the general software engineering, those are the two things that I think matter here. And actually, if you look at that from a supply perspective, so how many of these people there are divided by the number of startups, the supply is much higher than in the UK, the US, and France. So you have a very high concentration of talent. The second part of this thesis on talent is around operational talent. So this is the people working in go-to-market roles and the finance function and everything that makes the operations of your business good. And these guys are coming out of the likes of Klarna, Spotify, Clio. They know how to go to 0 to 1 and 1 to 10 and then 10 to 100. And this is hugely important, right? Distribution is almost as important, maybe as important as what you're doing on the technology and product side. And you really need those players in order to make your business effective. And then the sort of final part of this is more of a cultural phenomenon. And it's like very hard to define, but I think it's as important, which is that the region is just very creative and innovative. And I don't think that's just spin. It's something that happens empirically in the world. And you can look at R&D as a percentage of GDP. You can look at the Global Innovation Index, where you have companies like Sweden, Denmark, and Finland consistently in the top 3. And what that means is that you just have this pool of talent, which are going to be doing very creative and innovative things. And it's the combination of technical talent, operational talent, and then this creative mindset. And you can sort of pull those together and think about why that matters at the application layer. As a starting point, to build a really great application company, you need a 10x product. So you need a novel wedge and something that's very differentiated to other products. And that's where that creativity comes in. You then need really great engineering, both to realize that initial product vision, and then also deliver on a roadmap, right? R&D never stops. This is something that happens continuously. And so you need to be able to attract and hire great engineers. And then lastly, you need really talented people to help distribute the product and optimize the business as well. And it's those 3 buckets that I think set the foundations for building great AI application companies in the Nordics.
I know part of why you are excited about the Nordics is also the strong university base that we have here, the research base. I'd love to ask you how you think about startups that come out of universities, and to what extent you like to see / want to see the operational talent as part of the founding mix as well, or are you fully comfortable backing teams that are purely technical?
So just one thing on that is that I'm not necessarily just interested in teams coming out of university. I would say I'm as excited as about all the founders who didn't go to university as those that did. And I think in particular in the Nordics and Baltics today, there's this cohort of very young, early 20s founders that didn't go to university at all. So this is people like Sebastian from Talentium, Charles from Strawberry, formerly Dendrite. And they have this spirit of rebellion, and they still have technical competency as well, and doing very interesting thing on the application side. So I think the universities are really good at helping to build those technical skills, but it's no prerequisite for success.
In other words, are you going so far, because I asked you a question about the university ecosystems and to what extent you believe in building on top of those, and you kind of pivot the question to well, I actually like the ones that haven't gone to university. Would you go so far as to say that that is actually a bit your thesis personally, that you are more interested in these profiles because you think they're rebels with a cause that are more aligned with the venture mindset than someone spinning out of university?
Look, that's definitely something we're seeing, right? There's so many of those types of profiles. Then again, there are also so many profiles that did go to university. So it's just one thing I've observed. I mean, Anton Osika, lovable founder, went to KTH, didn't drop out. So I think it's hard to ever get lost in this is the one profile we're looking to. Like people are rich and nuanced, and it's very hard in this industry of outliers to like narrow in on any one profile. So I wouldn't say that it's just people that have dropped out, although that is definitely an interesting thing we're seeing at the moment.
Could you tell me a bit about how you view the different founder profiles that we have in the Nordics? Or new Nordics? Let's just restate that. New Nordics, you're saying that because it's not only Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland, but also a bit more Baltics as well.
I think that's how most of the people covering that part of the world are categorizing it this day is new Nordics. And that's because there's a lot of exciting things happening in the Baltics now. And people basically want to add that to their coverage. Within that region, there are definitely a core set of profiles that we're finding particularly exciting. And I say all of this with the side note that people are very nuanced, particularly founders. So this is more directional than it is absolute. I think the first profile that we find really interesting is this founder with like a platform mindset, a very expansive product vision, and then pairing that with a very strong focus on data foundations. I think the standout examples here are Tuomo Riki from Zero, and then Jonathan Sanders from Light. And what they're doing, which is super interesting, is integrating data infrastructure into the application very well. So being able to do things like setting up the RAG, cleaning the data. And what that means is that you can have a much higher quality output in terms of AI. The second one that we really like as well is this opinionated, tasteful product curator. And you see examples of this like Anton from Lovable, which is a very UX focused product with very good design. And then another I really like is Marit. She's the founder of Strise, which is an AML automation platform. And you would think that AML, so anti-money laundering, would be kind of a tied category, but she's managed to both animate that category with this awesome podcast and then also build a really sleek, amazing product as well. So that's cool. And then the last one, which we touched on already, is the Rebels Without a Cause, which is just this cohort of kind of crazy, rebellious founders in their 20s, jumping out of university, dropping out, and just going off and building companies. So I think Max from Leia was the pioneer here, who went pretty much straight out of university into founding Leia. Now Lagoran, obviously raising some very impressive founding rounds. You also get people like Charles from Dendrite, Sebastian from Tavantium, Arvid from Cura. So this sort of young cohort of exciting young entrepreneurs that are in the new Nordics.
Let's talk a bit about where they come from. Where does these categories kind of stem from? What do you see socially in the new Nordics that lead us to create Rebels with a Cause?
So I am no sociologist, but I find myself asking myself this a lot. And I have a few theories, and they might be quite bad, but I'll share them anyway.
It's too late to not go into the territory of just talking about things we don't know too much about. So please continue.
So one example would be these founders in their 20s. Like what they're doing is a very rebellious act, right? Particularly in an economy which has such a high proportion of services jobs. Because essentially what they're doing is rejecting that. These are all smart people. They can go and work in consulting or law or finance. They're choosing to take a much riskier approach. So I think that that's interesting. And I kind of reflect on it in the same way that I reflect about my experience in the UK, which is that you have these high services economies and quite like compliant, fairly like small C conservative cultures. I think what is different in the Nordics to the UK actually is that there's maybe a higher proportion of people in the Nordics that just reject that. And they go, right, I'm going to do the thing that's the opposite of that. And they then go and build startups, which is probably the most high beta thing that you can do. So I think it's in many ways a rejection, right, of the mean.
It's pretty funny because so I'm born and raised in Denmark, right? So I have a bit of something to pitch in here. So what I see in Denmark is that we have this beautiful confluence of having a very liberal upbringing, not liberal as right wing, but liberal as you can do whatever you want, you can be whatever you want. You can think whatever you want. You can wear whatever you want. There's a lot of liberty in how we raise our children. And then we have, of course, a school system that's also teaching us to think critically right from the beginning. As an example, I was completely dumbfounded when I heard from a UK peer my age. He said, Andreas, I've never presented in school. Like, not once in my 16 years of school have I been tasked with presenting X topic in front of my class. And I was like, what? My daughter, or even myself, like just from the age 6, we were presenting whatever topic, whatever. In the beginning, it's what you did in the weekend and what you think about X, Y, and Z. And later, of course, it's big presentations on the back of a research topic. And that's already in the 5th grade, 6th grade. You'll be given a week to research any topic that you want. And then you come back and present that to the class. Having that freedom to chase your curiosity, and at the same time also being put in a bit of what you might call an entrepreneurial situation of figuring out how am I going to present this topic to everyone, all that stuff, I think really created a good foundation for being creative and self-motivating and so on, and independent. And then we have a weird thing, which is super contrasting to what you hear in the US, which is in the US, they always talk about how the fact that you are your own, you are the master of your own fate. If you don't succeed, you fall on your ass, and that's a good incentive for everyone. In Denmark, we have the opposite, and it's the same in Norway and Sweden, right? Because we're told, go and do something great. And if you fail, don't worry. We've got you covered. You've got 2 years of social service or social money, right? Which means that I think that if you have an entrepreneurial spirit in the Nordics, the risk of starting something is very, very low. And I think that that really helps a lot of people get out of the nest. And I always say to my friends that I haven't yet taken the jump, come on, man. It takes us a small session for us to brainstorm your route to a startup that leverages your expertise. And then you freeload a bit on the public system for a year while you build that in the background. And then you can launch and you can be the master of your own fate forever. Like,
I think those are great points. I think education is super important. It's interesting. I obviously wasn't educated in the Nordics. I just lived there. It's really interesting to hear that perspective on it also. And then, yeah, having a state that subsidizes you to innovate is a pretty cool feature as well.
Yeah, what I hate though is that you have to be a bit okay skirting some of the rules, or at least, well, you don't have to skirt the rules, but you have to definitely frame things in the right way. But it can be done, which is I think the important thing, and also because if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're also the type that figure that stuff out. Let me go to the other the product curator, the person with great taste. Do you have any view on where that comes from? We obviously have Bjarke Ingels and that kind of thing in Denmark, an architect that's world renowned and has built incredible things. So there's a design culture.
I think it's a bit above my pay grade. That I think some of the best things about this job, actually being an investor, is sometimes you just need to see something happening, and then it's someone else's job to explain why it is happening. Right? You're rewarded for action and being first at things. I do think people do. To your actual question, I do think people reference the sort of Scandi design aesthetic quite a lot. So maybe that is one thing, but it's a really hard thing to give concrete answer on. These things are so
Yeah,
and
I
complex.
think you're right. How do you think about spotting this outlier talent, so to say, the spark in an individual that you can see this is something that looks very exciting? How do you measure that? How do you think about it? How do you talk about it inside Kinnevik?
You're asking the hard questions today.
Of course, always.
Okay, so one thing you can hold on to, right, is have they done something really special before? And it doesn't necessarily need to have been a successful startup. Like, have they shown that they can be creative, that they can build things that people want, and that they can execute? So that's usually a good pointer. There's also a lot of this, particularly in that like first conversation, which is gut based. And the heuristic I have for that is, because I used to be an operator, is, do I want to go and work for this person? And I think that like sums up so much of the skills that founders need to do, right? They need to hire, they need to sell, they need to inspire you. So that's always one that I ask myself at the end of a conversation is, do I want to throw caution to the wind and go and work for this person?
It's actually, it's a great example because, you know, given your age and your background as an operator, that's the thought you have. Is this someone I would want to work with, or slash for? I always, when I talk to angels that want to get into LP investing, I always, because they're always a bit like, how am I going to think about this? You know, I haven't done fund investments before. And I oftentimes summarize it as, well, you've been an executive through your entire year or your entire life almost. I would probably think about this as, is this someone I would want to hire as my executive to run my venture program? Because that all of a sudden flips everything in a way that's usual to hear for people. And I really like that perspective. And I often would also advise maybe some emerging managers that are, you know, thinking about, or people thinking about breaking out as emerging managers, ask yourself that question. If you had $1 million, would you hire yourself to look after the venture allocation? And I honestly think that question can sometimes help people realize that they're pursuing their own dream rather than doing what they're best positioned to do right now. So that's a provocative statement, but I do think it's one that helps people a lot. We're going to talk about that with Evan Finkel and Carmen from Cocoa soon in a podcast as well, where we dive into this topic of how honest should we be with our peers in the industry, how ruthless should we be when we give feedback. And I am on the side that it's absolutely integral that we are super ruthless with each other, because you can go so long trying to raise that first fund without getting traction. And honestly, you could have gotten some hard learnings early in your career instead.
It can be kind to be cruel sometimes. Time is our most valuable resource, right? It's the one thing that is like truly finite. So if someone's going to dedicate multiple years of their lives to something that you think has a very low probability of success, then I think it's your part to either tell them or tell them what they could do differently.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Tell me, Charlie, I want to ask you, because you used to be a founder and operator, I want to ask you, how do you see that transitioning now into your investment role at Kinnevik?
I'm no tenured operator. I didn't do 10 years at Revolut and then became an investor. So I'm not sat there in the cockpit, in the cockpit, right? Sort of pulling out years of experience. And actually, I would say that one of my main reflection is I don't leverage it too much. I think what it has given me is, so I used to run product at a startup, and I did that when I was a student. And it just has given me an obsession with tech, product, and in particular, this interest in technical people also. So it's more of a motivational point than here's all the things I learned when I did this at a startup. It's more that intrinsic motivation piece.
Is that what you expected when you turned investor?
I actually thought I would be leveraging it more, but I think that one of the things you have to do as an investor is like practice humility. I think if I was talking about all the things that I learned building a startup when I was 19 years old, 20 years old, that's probably not very good advice. So I tend to try and hold on to the things that I do know.
How old are you now?
27.
What do you say to your friends that want to get into venture or maybe have just started?
And it comes back to the point that you said just now when we discussed around being, that it's kind to be cruel. Yeah. This is an industry where you want to be at a fund that has access to the best deals. Like, it's such a hard industry to get into, but there's no point jumping into a place where even if you find the best investment in the world, you can't do it. So I always say think very carefully about which seat you pick because it really matters. I'd say that's a pretty key piece of advice.
My perspective is venture is an outlier business, unfortunately, both on the startup side, but also on the fund side. We have some firms that are doing one banger after the other in terms of funds that create enormous returns. And then we have a good swath of funds that are just not that impressive. I was in that position in my early years. I was not with a great fund. And it's incredibly hard as someone coming right out of school or out of something that is not super close to venture, so to say, to recognize that this is not a good team. It's incredibly difficult. It's really about that. And we talk about it in terms of startups as well. If you haven't seen great, it's incredibly hard to diligence. And I really think that is one of the important things to think about.
I so agree with that. Also, outside in this industry is so hard to read. And it's tricky, right? Like you almost don't know this until you end up working in the industry. So it's a really tough one to navigate. But I would say that if you're thinking about joining, that's a really important place to start, is that.
It's funny because part of our business at EUVC is helping people build conferences for venture, right? And I always start this conversation with, first of all, let me tell you everything about how venture actually works and the things that you keep doing that is fucking everything up for you. Venture is just so different from most other things, and almost everyone in venture, or at least everyone you want to have come speak or be involved with your event, are so senior that you cannot make the smallest mistake. If you spent their time non-wisely, then you will have lost them forever, and you will lose everyone that's connected to them, so to say, when you're an event organizer. And there's so many incentives around creating events that run contrary to what you as a venture investor want. Most venture investors do not want to be in a place where there's tons of people. You get nothing out of volume. You actually would prefer that someone had done a really hard work to get only the best 100 instead of 5,000 there. Because all the other stuff is just noise. As an event organizer, that's exactly what you want. You want 5,000 people there because that's what you can tell sponsors. That's what you can. Most event organizations are also funded by local government. That's what they want to see. So there's so many things when you create an event for venture that where your incentives are the contrary to what your investors want. And that's why I think we have so many bad events in venture. And I always use, I almost use as my measuring stick whether an event is going to be good. Was this born by a VC firm or was it born by people that are outsiders? Hello Tomorrow, incredible conference because it's 10X founders that started it, right? The Drop by Peel Blue Dot, great conference because it was started by venture people. They know what they want and they know what they don't want. And they're okay not making another 50K or 100K on sponsors if the event is truly valuable for everyone there. Because it's not about that extra bit of cash. Whereas if you're a big event organizer, that's everything you think about.
Yeah. But I think there's a great point, in particular, the focus on quality. This is, as you say, like volumes are less relevant here. Like most of us are doing 1, 2, 3 things a year that matter, right? I spoke to a really good investor the other day and he said, I have 10 things in my pipeline. If I ever had anything more than that, I'm not doing my job properly.
Yeah, exactly. And and they don't get it. Like you also see from the outside, because we tend to communicate that as a venture ecosystem, we see 10,000 deals a year. We only do 0.1%. Well, that's an LP communication thing. You don't need that for anything else.
I think that's one more thing as well, which has been the thing that I've probably changed my mind on the most, having joined this industry, is outside in. You think this is like a land of ivory towers and crystal balls. And like, let's be honest, a lot of this is go to market still. Like brands, sales, all of these things matter a lot in the role of an investor, right? Like we are selling capital. Now, a big part of that is the picking still, But at the end of the day, like, you do still have to win the deal. So that's definitely also been one other thing I've changed my mind on.
So I have a slightly controversial view on LP investing, which is it's actually not that hard. So it's hard to build this. There's a lot of things you need to learn, but once you've learned it, it's not necessarily that hard. It's super hard if you do what Isomer does and always tries to find the thing that no one else saw. That is difficult. But if you're just looking to get exposure to venture and want to do that with consistently good returns, but you're not looking for the big outlier that no one else has ever seen, not looking for that diamond in the rough, but just looking to do good returns in venture, it's not that hard because we know the ecosystem is super networked. So you'll very quickly be able to find out who are the best. It's very easy once you're inside the industry to also fact check people, to do reference checks, so on and so forth. So for that reason, once you understand venture and you're in a place where you can access the investments, then it's easy. However, it's the accessing part that's incredibly difficult. But my view is it's not hard to pick. It's hard to pick if you're only doing fund ones or fund ones and twos, because there's so many. They have yet to prove them. Even the best ones have yet to prove them. That is difficult, I agree. I'd love to ask you, to what extent are you willing to say that that is also the perspective when you're looking at founders? It's actually not that hard to pick. It's more about being able to win once you've picked.
Is this like pretty topical in my mind as well, this one? So I would say that, and this is a simplification, but I would maybe say that there's two like frames of reference here, right? When it comes to picking founders. So it ties into what you said. It's pretty easy to pick a founder that's done it like 2 or 3 times before. And maybe that's, as you say, that's like the fund 3, the fund 4. And then, as you say, it's a question of access. And then there is the more non-consensus, like contrarian view, which is picking the founder that's never done it before, or even harder, never done it before. And there's no pattern around what they've done previously. And that is the harder call. A lot of people definitely try to optimize for that first profile. And I would say in particular, this is something the US funds do. And the data in the US suggests that they should. I can't remember what the exact percentage is, but it's a very high percentage of the big outlier breakouts in the US come from that second, third time founder. So it makes sense that they do that. Europe's actually slightly different.
Can I just add to it? And we should get to the European perspective as well, or the European nuance. I was also about to say that it's also a bit about once you have enough money to get in, so to say, and put to work, you can kind of play that, because it is true that if you have big enough outliers, you don't have to care much about entry pricing, as long as you just make the right bets, i.e. a 3-time founder that has done great things before, well, probably the next thing is going to do quite well as well. That is okay. But if you're a 20 million or 50 million euro fund, you don't get to play that game, because you can't fight with the big guys. And that's a bit where a lot of our learnings come from when we talk about venture. It's a lot of podcasts and a lot of writing by people that are throwing around 500 million euro funds or dollar funds. And the playbook for a $20 million fund is completely different.
It's a different business.
But where are you on this, though? Because as Kinnevik, as you started out saying boldly and with big words, you have more capital under management than most everyone else. So in Europe, you could actually just play that game.
The way we think about the world is very much in the lens of our 4 sectors. So software, healthcare, life sciences, and climate. And we're pretty opinionated around those. And sometimes that means backing something a little more non-consensus in terms of what the founders did before. And then in other times, backing the person that's done it before. We have examples of both. So yeah, playing both sides.
Yeah. And then you were about to come to the European nuance on the question about how to decide on founders.
Yeah, so the data on this suggests that with European founders, the really successful outcomes, the founders maybe didn't come from that sort of second, third time like founder profile as much as the US. So maybe there is a bit more scope over here to look for the slightly more non-consensus profiles.
Yeah, and it's also just a product of the fact that we don't have too many 3-time founders here. So in that sense, it's still a more nascent ecosystem. So automatically, it ends up being like that. I also think that we in venture have truly shown that we can kind of create self-fulfilling prophecies, at least to the extent that we can pump deals up. Doesn't mean that we can exit them in the end, but unfortunately, especially the US ecosystem have shown that we're very, very good at creating herd behavior all the way from Series C to Series D, which is then what we're all trying to get ourselves out of now. All right, then let me ask you a final question, because we're coming up on time, and I want to ask you that question around why do you focus so much on people? We hear that all the time in venture, but I find it an interesting question because there's so many different answers to it.
It's the most fundamental question to this job. And there's a short answer and then there's a long answer. So the short answer is that this is such a dynamic landscape, particularly in this new age of AI. So it's the only real thing that you can hold on to. And the way you can think about this is that model advancements right now have the potential to shift the ground beneath our feet overnight. And like multiple application companies have been caught out by a new model release. So if you have a team, and in particular a sort of core founding team that are agile, innovative, that's actually something pretty tangible you can hold on to. It's like a heuristic in diligence, being like, the one thing I know is this landscape's going to change. How able are these people to change in that environment? That's the short answer.
Tell me the long one. I'm okay with that.
So the long one's a little bit more philosophical. So I'm a massive techno optimist. I've been writing about technology since I was a young teenager. But I think investors can get lost in thinking that technology is the hard thing. Technology is never the constrained resource. And you can think about this in an abstract sense. So all technology is modular and it's recursive. And this essentially means that it's made up of other ingredients and other technologies that already exist. So if you take something like foundational models, this is really just the novel assembly of pre-existing parts, algorithms, code, chips. And you can reduce that even further to simpler parts. The takeaway is that it's rare that someone can have a technology no one else can use. There is no magic. We all have access to the same parts. And if you take something as technologically formidable as foundational models, when we spoke to a lot of these providers, they were saying the differentiation really is an engineering culture. It's in this assembly of people and how we manage them. And you can think about why that's so important, right? Because how fast you're shipping, which flows from engineering culture, is probably the number one determinant of success at the moment, providing you're shipping well. And then if you play that sort of thinking forward, you can replicate most products and most technology, but really what determines success or failure for now are the human decisions around a business. So what's your philosophy on UX? How are you going to position the brand? What customer profile do you think this is most useful for? So it should be obvious, but it's actually people that are the main points of differentiation in all of these things. It's probably the thing that we should try and index the most to. I think it was Buffett that said that without vigilance and execution, even very established companies with what you would think to be strong moats, their competitive advantage fades. And again, this underscores just how important people are in this. It's that assembly of people, how strong they are at leading, and their ability to respond to change, really that is the determinant of success or failure. So I always get confused why we get lost in anything else other than that.
I bet a lot on founders. I bet a lot on outlier talent. And I have huge faith in a select group of elite people. But I have a very controversial stance on the average Joe, which is I do not think they're very good. I do not think they're plugged in when it comes to thinking about the work. And I think that goes for the US just as much as it goes for Europe, just in case anyone thinks that I'm talking about dunking on European culture here. No, I have seen it everywhere. I cannot fathom that we have US investors talking about European culture and not seeing the contradictory point that at the same time they're saying that 80% of the people out working at Twitter weren't doing shit. 80% of the people working in the public space are not doing shit. Well, the same people saying that are saying that we have culture problems when it comes to working hard in Europe and being productive. Fuck you. Like, you're obviously just creating a narrative that fits your own storyline and understanding of the world, but is completely detached from reality and doesn't even look inward to question themselves. So, but I want to ask you, because you now spoke about the importance of people and not only founders. My view is very much when looking at a venture firm as an example, it's the founders that I really, really care about. Then what I care about in terms of all the employees, and sorry, you're an employee at a venture firm, I think of them as extensions and really just a yardstick on the founders, whether they have been able to attract the best and hire the best. But I think the vast majority of people that do not spin out and build their own thing tend to not punch anywhere close to those true outlier people.
I agree with that. But I think, and it sounds like we're saying the same thing, which is that I think that even if you have a great founder and you have rubbish employees, I don't think you're going to be successful. But I think that a great founder knows that they need to have great employees.
We obviously don't have rubbish employees. My point is
they do the hiring people really, really
the
well.
founder talent is 10x, or there are some people out there that are 10x everyone else. I'm not saying anyone is rubbish, or that's not my point. My point is just there's such a big gap between the top outliers and everyone else.
I agree with that. I think what's interesting is how this changes with AI, and as models improve and we do more interesting
How do you
things.
think it changes?
It's such a great question, right? I think this is all contingent on model advancements and how much better we get with things like inference, because that will determine how good the AI is. But I think there is one scenario where AI gets really good and maybe we get to a point of AGI and drop in employees where you have much smaller teams. And I think one of the interesting things there is that centralizes decision-making a lot more. Like, people like to say, this technology is going to democratize something. It's like, I don't know if that happens with AI. I think it centralizes decision-making. When you think about what's happening is you're just outsourcing a bunch of decisions to employees.
Which is crap.
Yeah.
Completely agree. I think it's going to be hugely extenuated or strengthened, this concentration of power, wealth, and expertise and ability.
We could have a very big company built with 10, 20 employees, maybe. Like, that is not unfeasible if AI continues to improve.
No, and it's just, even if we think about it startup wise, absolutely true. But even in corporates, you're going to have a department of 10 people or 20 people or 30 people. And then you realize, wait a second, there's one guy or there's 3 guys and girls who are like doing 5x the rest of the group. And that, I think, will become so obvious, and then we have the problems. Well, this was an exciting conversation about everything spinning out from the core conversation, which was AI talent in the Nordics.
100%. But those are the best conversations, right? When they kind of morph into new things as you go.
Yeah, I thought, why not run with it today? Let's have some fun. Thank you, Charlie, for joining me on the pod.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a really great conversation.
Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. Discover where operational expertise meets innovation. With end-to-end coverage across fund admin, tax, accounting, compliance, ESG, and more, we take care of the complexities so you can focus on what matters most. Whether it's supporting visionaries or maximizing returns for your LPs, our tech-driven and comprehensive solutions empower you to achieve your goals with confidence. Partner with Ace Alternatives to streamline your operations and elevate your fund success.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.